Okay. Yeah, Ron, thank you for praying for me. And for all of us, tonight's going to be just a little bit different than the last couple of weeks. And I'll explain to you why here in a second. So this is the kind of twofold vision that I have for dealing with depression. Like I said before, I'm not an expert. I'm not trained. I haven't researched. I've heard some things. I've seen some things. I've read some things. I don't know what's true. I don't know. What my psychologist told me was that nobody really knows anything about depression, but so that, that doesn't help. Like, he's like, we're all just kind of figuring this out. So, I guess I'm in good company that way. But I've got a lot of experience, and I've had some success. So that's why I'm talking to you, just to share that and you glean what you want. And this is kind of where I've arrived so far, is this kind of twofold vision of dealing with depression, living with it and fighting against it at the same time. And that can be a little bit of a cognitive dissonance, like that sounds like a contradiction if you just glance at it. That one hand you're kind of just accepting that you're living with depression, and then on the other hand you're fighting it. So it sounds like a contradiction, but it really isn't. They go absolutely hand in hand. If you try to do just one of those two things, you'll lose. That's my experience anyway. So it takes them both. So and so I'm kind of bringing some things together that that I've talked about for the last 2 weeks tonight, starting to take a little bit of form. So I'm going to start right here. You ever seen this in a movie or whatever? You ever seen this kind of thing? Over and over, right? There's always this car chasing this pedestrian. And what are you thinking? What do you want to yell at this guy?
He's not going to win.
Oh, he's not going to win.
Turn.
Turn. Yeah. No one's yelling run. That's not helpful.
Get off the road.
Get off the road. But he's just right down the middle of the road. He knows what we know. He knows what we know, that car is bigger than him. And that car is faster than him. And even though he knows those two things, he has no hope in either size or speed. Away he goes. Okay? Why? You know what that's called?
Stupidity.
It isn't. I know. That's the temptation. You know why you think that? Because he's there and you're there. If you were there, you might be doing the same thing. Why? Panic. It's panic. You panic, you just run. It's no different with depression. If you panic, all you do is run. There's no sense to it. You just go and hope the monster can't catch you. And it can, and it will. So that approach doesn't work. So depression, panic. Here are 5 ways to get run over by depression. All right? Now, maybe you can identify with these, hopefully in your past, but you might identify with one in your present. And if I push a button, good, that means you're in panic mode. And that's not going to help you. I've done them all, okay? So here's the first one, deny. Deny. Actually, you know what? I'll just hand these out now. I have some, tonight I'm going to fire hose you with content. So I printed these off to help so that you don't feel so, I'm telling you, I just have to fire hose you with stuff. There's going to be all kinds of words. Because I'm running out of time. I only got 2 weeks.
You could come back.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know what you know. I don't know how much of this, you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is all new information. I don't know. So these sheets will help. So you can refer to them later or whatever. You can make notes if you have a pen, whatever, whatever. Hopefully that helps.
Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's fine.
So the first one is to deny. And you remember, I told you that's what I did, right? No such thing as depression. It doesn't exist. That was where I started. There's no such thing, especially as a Christian, it doesn't exist. It's just, self-pity and whatever. So that's the first one. That's a kind of a panic approach to the whole concept of depression. Let's just throw it away. Let's not even look at it. So that's the first one. You're probably not there because you're here. Makes sense to me. If you're there, you probably wouldn't have come here, especially not 3 weeks in a row. Second one's ignore. Okay, I acknowledge that depression's a real thing. I acknowledge that I have it. But I think I can just white knuckle this. I think I can just push through, keep doing what I'm doing, make no changes at all, and just go, go, go. Pure will, pure effort. I'm just gonna, and that's the guy, I can just outrun this thing. Like, everyone's watching going, you're not out, it's gaining on you. Okay, so that's ignore you. Again, you're probably not there because you're here. Embrace. Total opposite. I did this one too. Once it caught me, basically, and I realized I can't outrun this thing. I don't have the power to outrun this thing or to beat this thing. I just turned and embraced it. Like, the anger sets in, you can get more angry than me. I just embrace the anger, I hate everything, I hate everyone, everything sucks, I suck, it all sucks, just blah, 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 just like a warm blanket.
You under the car?
Huh? Right under the car, just dragging down the road, Yeah, absolutely. And which kind of leads to the next one, which is excuse. So then it's like, well, I can't because I have depression, and sometimes that's true. So, and all these, there's some truth to them all in a way. But it's just an absolute get out of jail free card on everything. I'm a complete jerk, I can't help it, I have depression. That kind of thing. Yelling at my wife, can't help it, I have depression. And that's just not true. It's just more of a, I don't know what to do with this. Fifth is then just quit. I'm just, whatever. Chug it. Completely check out. That's the last and final, obviously. Once you reach that level, you're done. And that's right kind of where I was. I was just entering into that mode, phasing in and out of it when some things began to change. Okay.
Is
5 ways.
quitting suicidal?
Huh?
Is quitting suicidal?
Well, there's 2 kinds of suicidal. There's the suicidal thoughts and desires, and then there's the suicidal intent and act. And so both can be, the suicidal thoughts and desires throughout, for me at least. Like, I was there quick. But if you can't find any way through, and it just, remember the whole relentless piece? Day after day after day. You can only run down that road for so long. And then you're just like, whatever, hit me hard, just finish it. Don't, just turn and line up with that car, because I just can't take this anymore. So, obviously that's the ultimate quit, yeah. And I think, and the reason why I'm doing this is that I don't know about that piece. Obviously I haven't been there. So I don't know that. I don't know what to say about that, but I'm hoping there's a way around it. And I'm hoping that we can get around it. That it is not an inevitability for anyone. That's what I'm hoping is true. I believe that's true, but I don't know that that's true. But I'm actually gonna push back on it. I'm not gonna give in to the idea that it's an inevitability for anyone. But obviously, that's the ultimate panic. I just don't know what else to do. So then you run over by depression. And all of these, at some level, splat. You just run over. It beats you up. Okay, so the opposite of panic. What is the opposite of panic? Think for a second. I know what your instinct to say is. Don't say it. Think for a second. The opposite of panic. What would that be? Go ahead.
Peace.
Peace. Will peace keep him from getting run over? No.
But I
So
jump
try
in
something
the
else.
car and go with it.
Jump in the car and go with it? No, that car's out to kill you. It's not letting you in. It's letting you under.
Wipers.
Yeah? Courage? Will courage prevent you from getting run over by the car? If this guy suddenly finds courage, will he get run over by the car or no?
Turn.
Change.
Think louder.
Plan.
We all know what he needs to do is turn. What will cause that?
Change.
Acknowledging?
Okay, so we're getting into the field here. We're starting to get there. Thinking. He needs to think. That's the solution. No one does this if they're thinking. You don't do that. You're like, so let's just talk about that for a minute. How to avoid getting run over by depression? Think. I know, does that sound trite?
No.
It does to me. Unless we think about it. Oh, you see what I did there? Oh, that was sneaky. The thing is, okay, here's what I'm going to do at this point. Did I? Yes, okay. I'm going to shift my language a little bit at this point and kind of personify depression, because my experience has been that depression, this might sound funny, just give me a little latitude here. Depression has a will, like gravity does. If you ask gravity, what does it want? Pull, right? It wants to pull. And so you can tell, it's what it's always trying to do, is pull, pull, pull. And so depression's like that too. It has a will, it has its own mind, it's pursuing something. That's the nature of it. And identifying that has helped me. To be able to see that has helped me. There's strategy there, just like with the car. When you realize that car wants to run you over, you're like, okay, now that I know what it wants to do, how do I avoid it? Now you can start thinking about it. What are its strengths? What are its weaknesses? What are its tactics? How can I fight back? How can I resist? How can I avoid? What do I need to do? Start thinking about it, and then you can devise plans. And that's all he needs is a second to devise a plan. 1 second. And he could just avoid that entire situation. Turn. The car can't go up the road. You have an advantage here. Okay? So here's my lesson number 6 that I finally figured out after a long time. And that the battle with depression is not the battle over the emotions. Depression's already won that. But the emotions are not even the goal. The mind is. And the temptation is that when depression takes our emotions, we give over our mind. We just give it over. Because we think they're so completely linked that we cannot think without our emotions. But we know we can. We do it all the time. It just doesn't cost as much as it does when you're dealing with depression on any kind of severe level. It doesn't cost, it's not as hard. But we do still do it naturally. It's why, again, I mentioned earlier, that's why we don't kill our kids. We want to. Sometimes we really want to. But we don't. Why not? Well, one, I mentioned before, there's a love underneath that hate. But also, because we're thinking, I'm not really going to kill my kids. I'm not going to kill my kids. And my kids have never thought I was actually going to kill them. I don't think. I'll have to interview them on that. And because they knew I wasn't just completely going to give over to whatever emotion I was having at the moment. And that's what depression is convincing us. And so here's the battle of the mind. Depression is telling us that our emotions are the biggest thing about us. And it isn't. That's not true. That's just a tactic. That's not true. Okay, so the actual battle is in the mind. That shifts the whole thing. So when I say we're playing a different game, depression is the game and depression is the player. If you can decide whether you want to deal with what I just said or not. But we're playing how to play this depression game, and it's to play against this depression player, to understand that this player. And it's all about the mind. And if you look at those panic, let me go and run back up there. Look at all those. Those are all mind things.
Mm-hmm.
They're all in the mind. How you think about things. There's no emotions there. Those are responses. Okay, there's the panic responses. So, we're going to try and think our way. So what we've done so far is we've talked about how to think about depression. And so that's what I've been doing the last 2 weeks. I didn't put it in those words, and I didn't know that's what I was doing until I came up with this. And I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing. How to think about depression, which was the difference is, so this guy is, I'm going to hold that thought. He needs to think about the situation, it's not just about the car. There's more going on than the car here. There's the road and everything else, right? So you got to get kind of out of, no, I'll get back to that second. So here's the first two things. Depression is an illness. That's how we think about it. So we get past all of the, you know, it's just an emotion. It's just self-pity. It's, you know, all that stuff we talk about. I won't spend time on it. And then that whole idea of I'm playing a different game, so I'm not going to be in denial about what my life is like right now. I have to play differently because I have an illness, depression. And whether you're diagnosed or not, the thought pattern ends up being basically the same. If you're, you know, when I talk about the difference between feeling depressed and being depressed, and there's a significant difference, and there's different strategies depending on kind of where you are on that scale. But it all ends up working out with the same kind of plan. So it doesn't matter a whole lot. You still have to deal with the fact that depression is changing you in your situation. And yet you got to deal with that, okay? You can't just ignore it. You have to deal with it. You're playing a little bit different game, and you can feel that you are. You get up in the morning, or try to get up in the morning, you can tell you're not normal. Something's wrong. So it's changed. You know, it's like I said, you can't play the way we used to. All right, so that's how we were talking about why did it change it? Now it doesn't like me. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, so that's the living with depression piece. Okay, I've accepted that I've got depression and now I have to live with it. But remember this guy? So here's the thinking that tends to happen to us. I want to do that, I can't do that because of that, therefore I'm going to do that. Why? Why does that lead to that? Because we're thinking this. I can't live my life, depression is preventing me. That's the persisting thought under all the thoughts. At least it is for me. I want to be able to do this. I can't because of this. I don't know what else to do. Then the panic sets in, and I go into panic mode, and I end up there. Now, get this straight, and I think I've made this clear. Depression itself can put you there, but it's panic that keeps you there. I think, for me. It just keeps qualifying that. I don't know anything, remember? I just talk like I do. I don't know how else to talk. But for me anyway, over the years I've found depression can put me there, but it is the panic that keeps me there. That doesn't have to remain. So if we switch our mind to how do I live my life given that I have depression, that's a whole different way of seeing things. Shift the game, shift the whole mentality. That's how I think about depression. Now I want to move on because this is what I want to talk about tonight. How to think above depression. Now I entered into this a bit last week. So above depression. So why is it that we say turn and he says run? Because all he sees is this, and we see all of this. We have this objective, big picture view of what's happening. And so that's why our inclination is to say, how stupid can you be? Because we see the whole thing and the solution is so clear. It's so obvious. Just turn. And if I were to say to this guy, so this has happened to him in a moment. If I were to say to this guy, okay, park the car back here. He stands here. And I say, all right, I'm going to walk back to the car and run you down. You've got between where I'm standing here and me getting in the car before I'm going to try and run you down. That gives him 30 seconds to a minute to think, to make a plan. You think that's enough time? You don't think so? Then he is stupid. Because I guarantee you, if I saw him start walking back to the car and I know he's going to run me down, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going that way. I'm going into the woods. I wouldn't need a whole lot of time. I'd need a moment. Like, you're going to what? But then I'll be like, okay, I'm going that way.
But what if his brain is foggy?
His brain is foggy? That's yes. If his brain is foggy, he's probably going to need a little more time. And so you're wondering, how do you think if you can't think? Okay, let me think. Has it been your experience that there are times that you can't think? Has it been your experience that there are times that you can? There's the answer. You think when you can. And then what happens, talk about this more next week, but what happens is you get some clarity. Sometimes it's very brief. You get some clarity, things make sense. Just a moment of clarity, you're like, why am I running down this road? You get this clarity, and usually with that clarity you can feel a little bit better. So you feel maybe a little bit better, you can think a little bit better, and depression is just right there down the road, looking at you, waiting. And what's going to happen, at least inevitably with me, this is what would happen. I'd get that clarity, I'd be able to think. I would quite often waste that time on enjoyment. Be like, woohoo, this is a great day, I'm going to enjoy my day. And I'd go about enjoying my day because I got the day off of depression.
Yeah.
But I didn't think, I just enjoyed all emotion. It's still part of the panic response. And so then I would fall back into a 3. I wouldn't be able to think anymore. I didn't learn a thing, I didn't do a thing, I didn't accomplish a thing, I'm right back where I started. That was not a solution. Now he's chasing me down the road again. So what I started to figure out later on was that when I would get my 4s or especially my 5s, and my brain starts working and I can think, I want to utilize some of that time to think about the game. I'm going to think about the situation. I'm going to think about depression. I'm going to think about my depression. I'm going to think about, how do I deal with this reality I am? At least for a bit. I don't want to wear my brain out. That'll push me right into a 3 in a hurry. But I'm going to take some time and think about it. Now, I'm a Christian, so it usually includes some prayer. And I'm going to talk about that a little more next week as well. So if you can't think, this is what living with depression is. If you can't think, you can't think. You just can't. So you accept that that's the day. You're a 3 that day. Those are the numbers I use. You're a 3 that day. You're not going to think. So you do watch Netflix or whatever you do when you can't think. For me, it's Netflix. I'm so sick of watching.
Well, what if you don't have time to not think?
What do you mean?
Because a decision or something has to be made.
Well,
It's kind of maybe a case.
then you're in a pickle.
And then what can you do to?
You need help. If you're alone, are you alone? You don't look alone. I don't know who this guy is.
No.
He's sitting awfully close to me.
I'm not thinking about me. I'm thinking about a person that I'm dealing with.
If the person you're thinking about is alone, then they're in panic mode because they shouldn't be alone, and it sounds like they have you. So the worst thing you can be with depression is alone. Worst thing you can be, for one of the reasons that you're explaining. You cannot figure this out on your own. And at least not very quickly. Like, I'm a pretty smart guy and I'm very intentional. And still, it took me forever to figure anything out. But I was pretty alone. And now I had help, but she wasn't helping me think. That's not her job. She's the feeler, for sure. Every once in a while, she gets me thinking a little bit. Mostly she just says, whatever. No offense. That's why I'm like, we need to, support group would be a good idea because we can help each other think. You come to the group and you're like, this is my situation, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I want to do, whatever, and the rest of the group can be like, well, I'm at a 4 tonight, and here's what I think. Like, oh, I thought of that. So and that's why a lot of people go to counseling and that sort of thing. They need someone to do the thinking for them. And when you can't think, and you need to think, you better have someone else that can help you think or think for you. You need help. That's all I know to say to that. But if you're in panic mode, you're not looking for help. Because you're not trying to think. You're just reacting. And that's how you get run over. That's why I'm pushing this thinking button. And so, yeah, it was a very good question. What if you can't think? Put people around you that can. And then when you can think. Intentionally think about it. Okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. I didn't say any of this was easy. All right. So, thinking above itself. If I told him the plan, gave him some time, if he could see then, have time to see the whole picture like we do, then he could probably sort out his situation. His situation is way easier than ours. He can just go off into the woods. Where's the woods for depression? It's not that easy. But there are woods. There are, depression has weaknesses. There is ways. Okay, so what we need then is a bigger picture than the moment we find ourselves in. Now, I introduced into that last week with the gospel. Now, raise your hand if that word is familiar to you. You kind of know what I mean when I say the gospel. Mm-hmm. I figured, okay, pretty much all of you, I think, but we are in a church. Now, however, I don't know what your background is, so I don't know what you think that word means. But what I'm going to do is take a big gamble here and give the gospel to you in a different way that made a big difference to me. And I'm going to fire hose you because this should take me a year to explain. And we're going to do it in a few minutes. So I'm going to try not to press too fast, hopefully get the concept, and then Q&A until 2 in the morning or something, I don't know. But I have to do this. I was avoiding this because of this complexity, and the newness it probably might be to you. But this is the biggest help for me. Understanding the gospel from this point of view, and I touched on it a little bit last week when God said, "Look up, look at me." Remember that? Mm-hmm. And that changed everything. That changed everything. Because usually, I don't know what your gospel is, but usually the gospel is, how do I get to heaven? Okay? That's not what I'm going to tell you. It's there, but that's not what I'm going to tell you. Okay? So that's a teaser. That's a hook. All right, so the gospel, that's always the picture. And we can argue with that, right? I'm oversimplifying. Everything I'm saying is going to be oversimplified because I don't have time. Obviously, it starts with the resurrection and works back to the cross. But once that's happened, then the cross says it all. So everything I'm going to say is in that context, and you'll see how that works. Okay, here we go. Gospel, 3 pieces: God, life, reconciliation. This is all on your piece of paper. God, life, and reconciliation. 90% of you have only thought of it in these terms. When you say the gospel, this is what you're thinking. Okay? There's 2 more parts to this that I think help put this into context and then give us a perspective that helps us react better. Okay? So here goes. God. If you're not Trinitarian, you're wrong. We can debate that later. Anyway, so it works like this. Before there was a universe, before there was matter, space, time, energy, there was God. Okay? And I can get into the metaphysics of what I just said. Before there was time, there was God. But we're not going to get into that. It's a logical statement, not a chronological statement. God was all that existed. Okay? You think about that for a second. There was simply nothing else. There's only God. It's all that exists. No spiritual beings, no physical matter, nothing. Just God. So everything that exists has come from God, one way or another. Okay? You know the whole narrative of that, but one way or another, it's all had to have come out of God. Okay? So that's going to create the train of thought. So to really understand anything at all, we have to understand God. And at any point we misunderstand God, we misunderstand everything else. And if you have depression and you don't have a clear understanding of God, you're going to get run over. You're going to get run over. You're going to be so confused and so lost and so panicked about what's happening, you'll have nowhere to go, no solutions, no answers, no hope. That in my mind. I don't know how people without God do depression and survive it. I don't know how they do it. And I haven't heard anybody tell me either. They don't know either. This is absolutely the solution. So, here's my theory. Here's the way I put this. Okay, God's got all these attributes. He's got a nature. And the way God is what's going to lead to everything else. Okay? You follow me so far? It's all very philosophical. All right, so we start with God. I'm going to give you 7 attributes, and on your paper, 7 attributes. There's many, many attributes of God. There's more that we've never even heard of. But these 7, I believe, drive the human narrative. Okay? And they are. First one's called holy. You familiar with that term? And we need to do weeks on each one of these. But essentially, this is the moral piece. We'll just say that. It's the moral piece. Okay? Morally pure God. Cannot do anything wrong. Good. He cannot do anything wrong. By his very nature, he is right. How right? Okay, every time I ask you the question, how much? The answer is perfect. How right is he? Perfectly right. 100% of the time, he's right. He cannot, by his nature, be anything but right. So you follow that? And if you think about it, that's just logical. He has to be. Okay? So, he's holy. So you have depression. God is right. He's not done anything wrong by letting you have depression. Wrestled with that one yet? I mean, my first response, my panic response was to be angry at God and try to run away. Remember that? I want nothing to do with God. He's cheated me. It's stupid thinking. That's panic thinking. And the reality is, God was right to let me go through what I was going through. See how that changes the game? Because if what he's doing is right, if what he's doing or allowing, amounts to the same thing, is right, why? What does that mean then? What does that mean for me? It's a whole different way to think about it, isn't it? This is right? How do I make sense of that? How do I respond to that? How could it possibly be? Let's think about that. He's wise. How wise?
Perfect.
Perfectly wise. He cannot make a mistake. He knows exactly what he's doing. You have depression, he's right, and he knows what he's doing. He's made the perfect decision. He always has and always will make the perfect decision. He's humble. You ever thought of that before? God is humble. If God's not humble, well, first of all, that picture of Jesus on the cross wouldn't make any sense. In fact, he wouldn't have even created us. Because the opposite of humble is even maniacal pride. He's only, he's God. What's wrong with a human being? What could we possibly bring to him? Nothing. And we can't bring him anything. It makes us anyway. That is because there's humility operating there. How humble? Perfectly humble. And we have to talk about what that means. Because we got a wrong idea of what humility is. But he's humble. Okay? It's very important and very cool. I've always had this picture. I don't know where I picked this up. I've always had this picture, and the Bible gives us this picture because of the holy piece. God on the throne with the temple, his robe fills the temple. This is Isaiah 6. And and the angels covering their face and covering their feet and flying and yelling, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," over and over and over again. Because it's so important to get that holy piece across to us, so it gives us these visions. But he's humble too. He doesn't need any of that. It doesn't matter. He just doesn't need it. He's God. What's he need? Nothing. And do you ever think that he needs things from you? He needs me to be a certain way. He needs me to, he's so disappointed, now I can't talk to him because, I didn't do the right thing, and because he's holy. And it's like God's wringing his hands up there waiting for you to get right. That's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. And when you see Jesus on the cross, you're like, oh my goodness. How does God get from that throne to that cross? And we're told in Philippians, it's because of humility. And people will quickly say, well, Jesus is humble. Why is Jesus humble? Because he's God. Right? So humility, isn't it? Oh, I just can't get over that. Love, we all know that, right? God is love. Love to talk about what that means. And you know what? At the very least, give him the credit of being better at it than you. Give him that much credit. Well, I love my kids, but I don't think he loves me that much. Ever pull that one? You know, I love my kids. I will never let them go, even though they're an idiot. But I'm an idiot, and God will probably let me go, because he's not as good at love as me. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Joy, you ever think about God being, how much joy? Perfect joy. Again, that serious, severe God that gets shoved down our throats. And then he says these things, you know, I say this so that my joy will be in you and your joy will be complete. Like, where did that come from? That came out of left field. I thought we were just talking about sin. No, it's about joy. Joy, peace. How much peace? Perfect peace. Does he get anxious? No. He doesn't get anxious. Sometimes it sounds like it, because he has these responses to us that complicate this. It'd be like, you know, he's even sad. Remember the verse in Genesis? You hear the verse in Genesis where it says God was grieved that he made mankind? Was grieved? Was sad. Does that mean God is not joy in that moment? Does that mean he's not peace in that moment? Does it mean that? No. How interesting is that? He's still 100% joy, 100% peace, and grieved at the same time. How's he doing that? The emotion's not the reality. The emotion's the experience of the reality. You can have an emotion, you can have an emotional response to a situation that's appropriate, and it not change your state of who you are. That's something else. I'm in total preach mode tonight. I'm so sorry. But... And then this one also doesn't get thought about a lot, but beauty. You want to see the difference between a successful culture and a not successful culture? It's going to be beauty. That's going to be one of them. And when you see a culture start to break down, you'll watch the beauty fade. If you see beauty fading in your culture, it's declining. And if you look around, if you're on the internet at all, we're in decline. God is, now that one's hard to wrap your head around it. God, how beautiful is God? Perfectly beautiful. Look at his creation. The whole earth is full of his glory. He's a beautiful God. He doesn't do gray. That's just not his thing. He does everything in technicolor. Everything. All right, so can you just look at this for a moment and just kind of soak this in? This is just 7. But I think these 7 drive the human narrative. Okay? And any questions about these 7 real quick? Am I missing something that you think is important? Let's quickly get rid of that thought. What am I missing that you think is important? Anything you're like, where's such and such? I don't mind. Throw it out there. No one's going to say truth? You'll think of it later if you don't think of it now. Wait a minute. Where's truth? It's in wisdom. Okay? Put that to rest. It's there. It's in wisdom. Truth and wisdom. You know, no wisdom without truth. Truth leads to wisdom or it leads nowhere. Okay. So that's truth. And you might be wondering about power. And if I was to do number 8, it would be power. But I don't think power is driving the narrative. I think power is being used to drive the narrative. I'll just say that and move on. These are the 7. And if you think about, you know, power will get us a lot of trouble. So no. Okay, there's our God. Does that help already? Man, that helps me. That helped me. When I finally realized this, and it took me a long time to arrive at this. A long, long time. A lot of thinking. And when I finally landed on these 7. And I'm absolutely convinced at this point someone would have to really argue me under the table on this. And it can be done. But,
Where does judge fit in?
holy.
Holy?
Holy is going to drive the judge piece. We're going to get into that. Okay? Because he's morally, how moral is he?
Perfect.
Perfect. A morally perfect person requires perfect morality. If he doesn't, he's not morally perfect. It's just, he can't help it. He cannot allow for anything but perfect morality. He can't, or he's not morally perfect. And I'll just give this a second thought, okay, just for a second, because this really confuses humans, because humans are so not morally perfect. But just imagine for a second that there's a judge, and his son is caught drunk driving, and the son kills somebody while drunk driving. And the son comes before his father, the judge. And the judge says, I love you, son. I forgive you. Go on. How do you feel about the judge? He's corrupt. He's corrupt. He has favored his son over the moral truth. The kid has to face the consequences, the judicial consequences of his actions. Something has to happen. Otherwise, the death of that person means nothing. There's no consequence. It means nothing. The judge is corrupt. He needs to lose his job. There would be an outcry. We would all know he was wrong. Why? We expect a judge to be morally sound all the time. And regardless of who stands before him, there is no just forgiving. And so we're going to get to that, right? This is part of the gospel. But you have to understand who God is, or those questions come up, right? Why Jesus? No other choice, that's why. Okay? So any other questions about this list? Because this carries the whole thing. All right.
I think an important word with all of this and God's interaction with us is grace.
We're getting there. Grace hasn't happened at this point. Okay? What's happening at this point is love and humility and holy. And they're going to come together. Well, actually, these are all going to come together. But particularly those are going to come together and produce that. Okay? So that's going to be a reaction. We're going to see that in reaction. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You're ahead of me, all. So what we typically refer to this as the glory of God. And if you're in Christian circles for very long, you start hearing this word thrown around. Glory, glory, glory. There's lots of angles that people come at this word glory. But it's very, very simple. The glory of God just means how magnificent this is. That's what it means. Okay, and that's going to carry the whole theology on glory. This is just so perfect and wonderful. Okay? And God knows it. He knows it, that he's perfect. He knows it doesn't get any better than him. He knows that. And as I believe, since God is Trinitarian, he's got three persons in himself. He experiences these as well as knows them. That's cool. Between the three of them. Okay. So, here's the glory of God. Now, let's move forward. Life. Out of God's glory, he chooses to share. Okay? Out of God's glory, he chooses to share. So he creates. He creates a universe. Now, I don't know what else he's doing. This is the human narrative. He creates the universe so that he can share his glory with beings who can appreciate them and share them back. Okay? That's the story. That's what's happening. And we call that thing, we call that the kingdom of heaven. Okay? And it includes, when I say the kingdom of heaven, it's at the conceptual level. It includes the physical universe. Okay? And more so, that would require more talk. But that's what we're talking about. So, God's expression of who he is outward. To be appreciated, to be emulated. So that there could be a whole kingdom of beings doing this. Because it's fun. Okay? These things are fun. These things are great. And you look how they relate. Why joy? Well, because of wisdom. No wisdom, no joy. Foolishness does not lead to joy. All right? And why joy? Because of love. And we all know that. Where do we get most of our joy? Where do we get the best of our joy? It's from other people. It's from the love. They just, same thing. You lose love, you lose peace. Things go ugly, there's ugliness, your life is just ugly, there's no peace. Round and round we go. They just interact like that. He made us for that. Okay? So, then we said no. And that's a bizarre thing, but there you have it. Mankind said no. And we still say no every single day. We say yes to some of it. and when we say no to the rest of it. Because he has his truth, but we want our truth. And he has his way, but we want our way. And he has his life, but we want our life. And so that pushback creates alternatives. So instead of holy, we have sin. Now you can do something wrong and not right, and it sticks. It's now there. It doesn't just happen and it's gone. It's a thing now. Instead of wisdom, there's foolishness. Instead of humility, there's pride. Ugly thing. Instead of love, there's selfishness. Instead of joy, there's apathy. And other words we can throw at this. Instead of peace, there's restlessness, and instead of beauty, there's ugliness. And does any of this look familiar? You see any of that anywhere? Around you? In you? What is depression, if not these things somehow? A result of them, includes them, involves them, like all the suffering, it's this. And there's actually more words that are still the opposite of those. It's those 7 things, and everything else is the opposite. And that, of course, then has its effect of just driving this wedge. And we can see it. I mean, just look, spend 15 minutes on the internet and look at it all. There's this massive wedge. And this seems so simple. This seems like, oh, that's so obvious. Why aren't we doing that? Well, because we're doing this, that's why. Too busy doing that. And there's a lot of panic. And other things. You know, you get to theology and doctrines and whatnot. But it's really, you just keep it simple. So there's this wedge, and when you drive a wedge between you and life, where does that put you? Death. It's the only alternative. It's the only alternative. This is life. And it's interesting especially when you read Jesus and he says the word life, just take a moment to think that for him, life is God. Always there prior to anything being made. Life is not trees or flowers or birds or us. It's not breathing. It's not existing. It's not biological reproduction. That's not life when Jesus says life. So when he says eternal life, he's not talking about you get to breathe more. You get to do more things. You just get to have more days. That's not what he means. He means eternal this. That's what he means. When he offers eternal life, he's offering that. That's why the only alternative to heaven is hell. Where else can you go if you're not going there? You have to go here. There's only, it's pretty binary that way. Because God's one thing, and everything else isn't. So you get life or you get death. So you drive this wedge, that puts us all in this strange predicament, and not just us, but kind of God in a way, if you can say God's in a predicament. How do you sort this? Like, he's perfectly holy. He can't just say, oh, don't worry about it. He can't do that. That would make him corrupt. So there's this kind of sticky point, and, seems like but you know what? God is that. And so that number 2 really comes to play here. Because it looks like an unsolvable problem. But God's got this wisdom. How much wisdom? Perfect. So he has a solution that could not be predicted. And even watching it unfold looked funky. Don't think that's going to work. People are still looking back on, I don't see how that worked. Worked. But all those things come together in the solution. Okay, solution's reconciliation. Corey? Nothing.
I am perfect.
Yeah, we know. Yeah, we know.
Little pride.
Yeah, maybe. All right, so the reconciliation. This is the part you guys are mostly familiar with. You know the incarnation, you know that word? Here's the solution. This is how we know God's humble. Oh, I'll just go down there and fix that myself. I'm going to become one of those little rug rats, we call it humans, one of those little itty-bitty little beings on that itty-bitty little planet, and that itty-bitty little galaxy, and that itty-bitty little solar system that no one else would even notice if I hadn't pointed it out. I'm going to go down and become one of them. You got to be humble to do that. If my cats are having problems, it's not going to enter my mind to become a cat. Okay, that's not how I'm solving problems. but God, yeah, he's, but God. It's my favorite two words in the Bible. Ephesians 2. Ephesians 2, yeah, but God. That's, all right. So he comes, one of us, that's Jesus. He lives life. He lives those 7 things, shows us how it's done, teaches us how it's done, faces death, faces the judgment. We all understand this, right? Okay, this is where it had to be dealt with. I was talking to someone recently, and she was like, I don't get how Jesus going through a few hours of pain and then dying solves the problem of a worldwide sin issue. And I said, that's because you're thinking of it in terms of quantity instead of quality. Okay? It's not a question of how many hours does it take. It's not a question of how much death must you face. It's the question of who's doing it. Okay? You put me on the cross, I can't solve squat. You put Jesus on the cross, you couldn't possibly sin enough to have that not paid for. Because on the scale, the value of Jesus versus the value of us and our sin is extremely lopsided because of who Jesus is. And this is why you kind of have to be Trinitarian to make Jesus work. He's God. That's why his death matters. And it also means what happened on the cross was much more severe than the physical pain that he went through. It was the relational piece. It was having a God that we describe, the perfect, eternally perfect, immoral, and all the rest of it God, have all of those things reversed on him in a moment. And in that moment, lose his Trinitarian connection of sorts. At least experience that loss. That's, the nails weren't it. It wasn't the nails, it wasn't the whips, it wasn't the thorns. Those were there for us to see, but that wasn't what was happening. So it was plenty. It was plenty. So the crucifixion, and then of course, so he beats the sin problem, he beats the death problem, and then he turns it over kind of to us. And so, and the Holy Spirit and all that, and you know the Holy Spirit and all that, right? So now there's this whole let's change the game, and this is the game we're really playing. Let's change the game. Let's change the game so that human beings can have access to God's help at an internal level, and that's the Holy Spirit. And then, of course, he will return. You all know that. Sooner the better. That is grace. Okay, it was coming. It had to. All of that is grace, and you can see the components that's happening here. It's grace means God's doing it because we can't, and God's doing it even though we don't deserve it. And let me remind you, God's doing it. Okay, so grace is all about what God's doing. It's not about what we're doing when it comes to grace. Okay? This really helps. Again, when you start looking at depression, how can I think? Well, that's how. How can I get through this? How can I push through this? How can I face another day? Well, I can do it. But only with this. That's why I say God's just the biggest piece. I don't know how else to do it without grace. I need the boot. I need the power bigger than me to do the thing I cannot do. I need God to do it himself. All right. Grace. But you do have to kind of respond like you do. You have to respond, okay? This is a relationship thing. So there's this faith piece. And it sounds very theological when you say it. Oh, faith. Do it. It's hard enough. It's hard enough. And I know there's lots of debate about God's role in faith, and I'm not going to get in that debate. But you know as well as I do. We can split hairs all day long on that. You know as well as I do, you're making choices. And even with depression, you're making choices. And in those choices, in that thinking, that's why I try to say, you have to put the gospel on first. Because in that thinking, when you get that clarity, that for that moment, you start with Jesus is true. So you can build from there. Because then all of this, when you have all of this, get all of this in your head, it can all just go and move in. And then you can start to think above depression. You get that moment where you're not just thinking, oh, the car's going to run me down. You can think, oh, there's more going on here than that car. There's more going on here. And there's God here. And you can start thinking right thoughts about all of that, and you need help doing that. And so God gives us grace, we give him faith, and then you know what he does? Adopts us. That blows my mind. Being God's child is really helpful. I was talking to somebody recently, again, trying to help them deal with depression, and she has a lot of struggles with her view of God, and God is always just trying to take stuff from her. I used to think like that. God's just always trying to take something from me. He just wants me to surrender something else. You know, he's just going to make me go through something hard so I can surrender something else. He's just taking stuff from me all the time. I don't know if any of you ever struggled with that view of God. And always asking for something more. And then you go back to the 7. Go back to the 7 attributes of God and say, is he trying to take something from me? Maybe. Why? Well, it has to do with joy and peace and love somehow. So, okay, take it. But anyway, she just had this negative view. And she said this thing. She's like, sometimes it's all just so much. And I feel like I just need to go out and do some gardening and not think about any of this. She said, but I know God's disappointed in me when I want that. I'm like, really? Is he? So think for a second, and I know this is a dangerous anthropomorphic move, but think about it for a second. If your kid has depression, and they can't always do relationship. If you have depression, relationship's hard, right? I call it humaning. I'm done humaning for the day. Done humaning, not humaning anymore. I can only take so much humaning. And I'm done. And that's not an offense to the humans, you know. It's not, you know. And that's what I'm saying. You don't offend God by saying, I just need to garden. I can't think about this anymore. Even you, I can't pray. I just need to garden. And God's disappointed in you. And like, go garden. Go garden. It's not that complicated. Simplify this. You know, look at the 7 again. Like, he's not mad at you because you need to garden. You're his child. You know, being a Christian is not just about doing the right thing all the time and not doing the wrong thing. And you know, we want to do that. Why? Because joy, peace, and all the rest of it. That is the glory of God. We don't sin. But it's not because God's waiting up there with a stick. You know, that's not what's happening. He's trying to give us his glory. And we want it, so we're we're avoiding all the crap that's not his glory. It's simple that way. And he's adopted us. Like, it doesn't get more gentle than that. Adoption is intentionally taking on a child as they are. Intentionally taking on a child that's probably, and certainly the case with us, dysfunctional because they haven't had the right home. And we intentionally take them on, knowing that comes with trouble, knowing that comes with grief, knowing that kid is going to steal from you and bring drugs into your house and whatever else. We take them on anyway. That's what God's doing. Okay? It's very gentle. It's very patient. It's very humble. You know, and we steal his stuff. We steal his stuff. And there's a way to handle that. But the way to handle it is not to panic and think that God's, just looking to spank you first chance he gets. Like, you might need to spank, but that's a different story. It's for your benefit, it's being adopted by God is the best thing ever. I don't understand why everybody doesn't want to do it. Like, I don't understand it. Why isn't everybody just want to do it? Why isn't Christianity just easy sell? I don't understand. And then back to that. He returns and, back to the kingdom of heaven. We're all back with those things, and we're doing those things, and, whatever that looks like. I don't know what that looks like. But it's wonderful and glorious, and that's... Okay, in the meantime, so where are we on these 6 things? Literally, where are we? In the narrative, where do we exist? Number 5. He hasn't returned yet. Okay, we haven't missed that. He's already resurrected. He hasn't returned. So this is where we are. So this is the life. This is the life we have been given and offered. Okay? Panic faces the car, doesn't see the situation, and says, depression is this dragon that's ruining my life and wants to kill me. The end. Run. Whatever. Run with the inevitability of getting run over. And we just, depression, oh, depression, oh, depression. And it's hard to avoid because you wake up in the morning and you're depressed. And everything's horrible, and everything's storming in your head and in your heart and in your life. And it's just total chaos. But if you can just, I don't know how you do it, I don't know how to explain how to do it, but if you can just take one step back and one step up so you can see it. Yeah, it's a lot of chaos going there. Can you do that? Can you separate yourself? Can your soul separate from your body long enough to see what's happening to you? Or am I weird? Because I can do that. Step off, step back, step up, see the chaos, and then put it into perspective. Depression isn't your life. Depression is just something happening to you in your life. And it's something God has let happen. So there's something else going on too. There's something good going on too. There's something good going on above all of that. There's something good going on even through that. If we want to engage it, I think I don't see any other way. I can't think of it any other way. This has to be true. Am I missing something? Am I making sense? And I know there's stories that challenge us, but the stories I don't think are the truth. I think this is. I think the stories there's more something else going on, but I think this is still true. And it has been for me. And I'll go through my 3s and I'll even get right close to it too. And I've been doing that recently. I haven't done that in a long time. I think it's this. It's messing with my head. And it's horrible. It is horrible. But I've trained myself over time, and this does take time. Like all of this takes time to apprehend. Comprehending it, maybe you can comprehend it tonight, I don't know, but apprehending it takes time. You have to keep coming to it. Keep coming to it. It's like Jesus said about the living water. You just keep coming to it. Keep coming to it. And it settles in. And then when you're just completely destroyed, and you're in that chaos, there's just this kind of underlining clarity now that says, I know what's happening. I'm in chaos. This is depression. I'm just experiencing this. And I may or may not come out. I'm dealt with that reality. I may or may not come out. I'm not just going to assume anything. But even if I don't, this is still true. And I ain't letting go of it. And that just helps somehow. I can see, I've always said this, you need to have a 10,000 year plan. You need a 10,000 year plan. So, we usually think in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever. And when you have depression, you can't think in 5 years and 10 years anymore. You don't know. I'm just now trying to get a part-time job after 8 years of unemployment. I didn't know 8 years ago I was going to be unemployed for 8 years. And I didn't know 8 years ago if I'd ever work again. And I still don't know if I can do it. I may get in there and find I can't do it. I get too overwhelmed and I start getting bad again and I can't do it. I don't know. Why am I trying then? Why even try? Because depression's not my life. And it's not going to run me down. And so I'm just going to keep trying because of all of this. Why not try? Because of the pain? No, that's the stupid life. That's not the cute life. The cute life can handle some pain. So, what that means is my life, and if you're a Christian, if you're not a Christian, fix it. For heaven's sake, stop. But if you are a Christian, good, you've got it. And if you're in any nonsense stuff going on, stop. Like, let's talk about this stuff. Because this is actually quite simple. Depression's making it hard. Depression's making it complicated, confused. And so is the other stuff, all that sin stuff. It's mucking it all up, and I understand it's very, very confusing, can be very complex, and very, but that's why I'm trying to simplify it. Get these 7 things down somewhere so that you can refer them. Because this is your life now. What are you doing with your life? This. This is what you're doing. This is what you're going to do forever. Start now. Keep it simple. And that's why I've been coming to CR, 4 years now, I think? Off and on, because, depression does that to you. But more on than off, just for the record. Why? Because of these. Because of these. Because I'm chasing these down. I want to be better at all of those. And I want to, here, I'll put it this way. I want to go towards God this way, okay? And I want to go towards God because He's this way. So it's very personal. God is this, and He's glorious, and I'm going after Him because He's glorious. Not because I want to go to heaven and I don't want to go to hell. Whatever. It's because He's glorious. Okay, and that's what makes heaven heaven, and that's what makes hell hell, by the way. So I'm going after Him because He's these wonderful things, but I want that too. I want to be glorious. I don't want to be an idiot. So, I want to be right, and I want to be wise, and I want to be humble, and I want to love and joy and peace and beauty. I want to be all these things. Who doesn't? Surely that's not a hard thing to sign up for, but it is a hard thing to pull off because the sin thing is way easier. But this is your life, and you go upward with it, and then you go, oh, it did to me again, and then you go inward with it. I want to be these things, and then you go outward with it. I want to give these things. Depression has nothing to say to any of this. All depression does is give you context. That's all it does. Big, scary monster because it feels so horrible. Really, it just gives you context. It just tells you where and with whom. That's it. So, like for me, where am I going to do this when I'm at a very low level? With her. With her. She's my world at that point. And my daughters, if they're in the house, are my world at that point. I don't need to think about missions. I don't need to think about church at that point. I can't. That's not my context anymore. I'm at a 2 or 3. All I have is what I have to have, and that's my immediate family. So what is my life then at that point? It's not getting out of bed. That's not the goal. The goal is not getting out of bed. I'm getting out of bed to do the goal. If the goal is to get out of bed, what kind of life is that? I'm getting out of bed because I want to do the goal. And this is way higher than getting out of bed. This isn't cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay? That's not what this is. I have a purpose. I have a place. And depression tells me where and with whom. So whoever is in my life, whoever I have the emotional or whatever space for it, and we all have them. I mean, you're sitting right here, you're surrounded by people, and you'll go home to people, and you'll be around people, you'll go to work with people, and the whole time God is there. So these 3 things are happening all the time. You're very rarely alone long enough to call it alone. So this is your life. Go engage God on these levels, pursue these things for yourself, grow in them, come up with a plan with God. Pray about this. Strategize. That's why CR is talking about these hurts, habits, and hang-ups. What's the problem with hurts, habits, and hang-ups? They're in the way. They're in the way. That's why. So we come to CR to, like Ron said, anger can screw all of these up. So we're going to kill anger. And God's like, you bet we are. There's a process. We're going to take you through the process. It's going to take time, and it's going to be frustrating, and all the rest of it. But when you lose it, when it's gone, oh, the joy and the peace, right? So pursue that, and then whoever you're around, what you want to do is bring them this, and depression is not an excuse. I have to try to bring my wife wisdom, humility, love, holiness. I didn't mean to skip that. I need to try to bring her joy, even though I have depression. Does that sound impossible to you? It doesn't? It's hard. It's hard. It takes some thinking. You can't do it emotionally. It takes thinking. You've got a plan. How am I going to do this? And so there's strategies. You got to find out what brings them joy. You got to just the little things. You know, maybe all I have to do is find the energy to do the dishes. And she knows that if I do the dishes and I have depression, I'm doing it for her. And it took a lot to do, okay, because that's my context. My context is doing the dishes takes an enormous amount of energy, or anything else. If I do anything else, it takes an enormous amount of energy. And I really, 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 really don't want to do it. And remember, I don't even care. Emotionally, I don't care if she wants me to do the dishes. I don't care if they ever get done. I'll use paper plates from the dollar store for the rest of my life. Throw them away. You know, I don't care. But out of this, I do kind of care. I want to do this. That's the interesting thing about it. Depression cannot take that from you. There's something going on underneath it all. You sign up for this, and then you pursue it just piece by piece by piece by piece. This is your life now. This is what matters. And you'll find everything falls in line with it. Why do we do missions? Why do we come to church? Why do Christians do the things they do? This, or they're off. It's this. That's why. And it's obvious. It's so self-explanatory. Okay. I think I'm done preaching. Yeah, I'm done. All right. 8:37. Okay. So like I said, very, very more theological and preachy tonight. And we did we've done now the thinking about and the thinking above, and now next week we'll do the thinking around depression. And so it's a lot more practical, still mindy, because the battle's in the mind, but also, you know, talk about some things that are just some activities that work, like the numbering system, that sort of stuff. So we'll get more practical.